I'm Daniel. I'm a couples therapist with Master's Counseling. Aaron is joining me.
That's right. And I'm Aaron. I'm also working with couples at Master's Counseling.
Fantastic. Registered psychologist, clinical counselor,
Yeah.
and you also bring a lot of experience working with people, right?
Yeah. Worked in the church, 18 years now, I think. Something like that. 18 to 20.
Extraordinary. Yeah, I feel like our paths are similar in a way where I worked with people in not-for-profit, working in mentoring programs with youth, with family for probably 15 years. So,
Yeah.
anyways, we're here to talk about couples counseling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I figured, maybe a good place to start would be what makes couples counseling different? Where is it similar to, what you'd find in individual therapy? What
Yeah.
makes
I'm
it
going to
unique?
want to hear your answer.
Yeah.
Actually, you and I have talked about this before, where there's a lot of instruction that you can give in couples work that's different than individual work. So sometimes I like the fact that you can just pause things and go, here's what I'm seeing, and do some instructional work, and how that can just break a session down, free it up, move it in the right direction it needs to go. As well, I really enjoy the back and forth. There's a lot of conversation you can have. I usually give exercises to couples, and I'll be like, here's the parameters, here's the template, go, and I'll jump in when you need me. And then they're actually kind of learning the skills that I hope they're using at home. And then, but also with support. So I really enjoy that. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think to name the obvious thing that's different is that there's typically more people in the room. And it's something like you said, it's energizing. I think it can be fun in the practice of it. The other thing that I think it can do, and I always tell this to couples as well, where I think just by virtue of being a human being in the world, I'll be talking with a group of people at a get together or after church, and inevitably the conversation will go to, so what do you do for a living? And I'll say, maybe sometimes I'll say I'm a couples therapist, and inevitably somebody will say, oh, I went to couples therapy once. And I feel like the counselor or therapist had it out for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're ganging up on me, exactly. So I think with the extra person in the room, while there's a lot of fun and energizing activities, instruction that can happen, I also think extra care needs to be had in just addressing that part of it. There's an extra person in the room, what are we working towards? Who's the client here?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And how do we move this forward in a way that's going to be productive?
It's good. Do you ever use language like my client is your relationship? I'm working for, maybe it's clarity, because maybe they haven't decided if they're going to work on the relationship yet, but clarity on where we're going, what that looks like. Or I actually did this with a couple once where I was like, you just need to know I'm for the two of you, even when I might be fighting the two of you, because they kept moving in a direction where their decisions, their behaviors, their communication was actually sabotaging what they wanted to do, and they couldn't see it. So I would get in the mix, and rather than being, against each other, they could push back on me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that resonates. When I was alluding to the client is a relationship, right?
Yeah.
And so then you have to decide how you're going to show up for that relationship and the individuals in the room.
Yeah.
And this is where it can become tricky because some people, might be sensitive to feedback.
Yeah.
And like you said, the instruction, I think, in couples therapy is so you simultaneously have to hold, I'm not necessarily taking sides, right? The side is on the side of the relationship, and there has to be challenge.
Yeah.
And this is one thing that I think you have to learn into in couples therapy is being able to really challenge effectively, be direct with what you're seeing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, progress will be slow.
Yeah. It's true. So how do you challenge effectively? I'm curious.
Yeah, I want to learn too. That's why I'm doing this. So I think one of the things is creating an atmosphere of feedback, right? So again, naming that up front. Hey, this is going to be challenging for all of us,
Yeah.
right? Let's step into it together. When I step in, I'm going to be stepping in with care and for the relationship. And then it's, I think so much of this is where it's similar to regular counseling, right? Regular counseling, individual therapy,
Individual
right?
one-on-one. Yeah.
Is how you present yourself and how you carry yourself. I think the core conditions from Rogers really comes into this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Unconditional, positive regard, empathy. But I think often even just leaning forward in an attempt to provide that feedback, you're leaning forward, you're making eye contact, you're slowing things down, you're being gentle with your voice, can really elicit positive responses.
Yeah.
Because what it shows is that you're there with them, right? And I think that partnership coming alongside being with in the process is yeah. Yeah. How about for you?
The challenging piece?
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to where I can have fun in the room, and I think that breaks in. I shouldn't say fun, just keep it in a tone where this is accessible.
Yes.
And I think for most coming in with a preconceived idea of I'm going to get picked on, or I don't want to be here, or my partner dragged me here, that's really common. I like to actually build language that I'll repeatedly use so that they actually get comfortable with me intervening, jumping in, challenging. So things I'll do is, hey, can I just make an observation of what I'm seeing? And then that might be physically standing beside one of the partners and saying, I'm receiving this way, and I'll usually embellish and overreact so that they feel understood, defended. And then their partner might go, yeah, okay, my words were maybe harsh, or they weren't getting across the way they wanted. Or I'll say something like, can I pick on you equally? And even though I'm really calling out one individual a little bit more, it feels fair and equitable because I'm also observing, hey, you're not maybe being open to what your partner has to say. You're sitting kind of closed. And when I use those over and over again, I actually see them modeling it back. So you're teaching them just by how you're interacting, what they should maybe try on. Like, and I use language like try it on like a new coat. If you don't like it, put it back on the rack. If you like it, wear it for a little longer. So these are new behaviors, new communication styles that I'll teach you. If you like it, it's yours. If you hate it, leave it here. And usually I see them picking it up or a variation of it. I love that too, because then it tells me, all right, that was helpful. I can keep running in that direction. And then challenging as well, when we talk about instruction, like the guidelines of the room. So like, hey, we said we would be respectful. Let's go back. That's really helpful too. So it's like early days, first session. This is what to expect from what we're about to do. That's really helpful. And there have been times where I've forgotten to do that. And then you're now setting a boundary. You're like, oh, shoot. So in that moment, it becomes even more, for me as a counselor, important to quickly help them understand why that's important, but also get them on page because they've stepped over a line they didn't know was there.
Yes.
And so some different ways that I like to challenge but challenging is always like, this is corrective. It's not punitive. This is to help you grow, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because we talked about feedback and challenging, and I think that's an important piece. That it's not always like corrective or punitive or challenging in the sense of that word. It's a lot of it is noticing, right? And just noticing reactions to things. You mentioned the chair or the taking each client's side. In my office, rolly chair gets used a lot. I'm often scooching up to clients, right? And what I'll do insofar as feedback is noticing the physiological response when something is said, right? Hey, can I pause the two of you right here? This person said this, and I noticed that, there's a change. And sometimes, I've heard, especially with clients that have been married for a long time, the feedback that I've gotten is taking the time to notice those things have been the most effective things, right? It's like, oh, I didn't realize, that my whole body is reacting to this particular conversation,
Yeah.
right? And then you can kind of get underneath it, and instead of having the same conversation over and over and over again, which is often a complaint coming into the
Yeah.
room, you begin to understand how your body is reacting.
Yeah.
And then you can take responsibility for your part in the conversation that way. So
Yeah.
I think it's an incredibly important distinction
Yeah.
in what you said. If the feedback isn't always a challenge, or it's not always saying, hey, you're doing this and you need to do this. It's some of it is just noticing, becoming aware of, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I'm reacting that way.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And you have permission as an outside person to go, hey, I noticed this. Tell me about that.
Mhm.
And you're asking all those questions for the benefit
Yes.
of one or both partners. But yeah, I love when those insights pop and you can see that, light bulbs are coming on, so to speak.
Yeah.
What about, I'm curious though, what about like favorite, you could call them an intervention or just things that you love to do in counseling?
Yeah.
Anything that you go like, that's my go-to. I
Yeah.
love doing this.
Okay. So this one's going to be incredibly simple. And I have this person who sat a lot with marriages and relationships that have been hurting.
Mhm.
And by virtue of a person being married 12 years myself, I really have this belief that success in marriage can come down to really simple things, right?
Yeah.
And of course, there's hurts and resentments that can build up over time that are a little bit more difficult to get to and to talk about. But to the end of it, the simplicity of it, I think one of my favorite interventions is the Gottman-Rappaport
Mhm.
intervention. So essentially what that is, it's a fancy name for an intervention where it's I talk, you listen.
Yeah.
Or you talk, I listen.
Yeah.
Right? And taking turns doing that. Embedded in that intervention is what I think is one of the best instruction manuals for how to listen effectively.
Yeah.
Right. And I really like this one because I think so many couples come into therapy saying, hey, communication's an issue.
Mhm.
Right. So when you can start with listening as an intervention, it becomes really useful. Right.
Yeah.
And what you begin to, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, but for me, why I like that intervention is because it's a beginning of changing the thought of conversation from there's your side and my side.
Yeah.
Right. And we
Yeah.
need to explore those to I need to understand your side. That's the
Mhm.
primary goal
Yeah.
of this exchange, right? And to be able to understand, I think there's a few things that need to happen. So you need to be engaged as a listener,
Yeah.
right? So that means asking a lot of questions, right? Curiosity.
Yeah.
Right? You can't understand without asking questions. You've done that a
Yeah.
bunch for me already.
Yeah.
Tell me about this, Daniel. I want to learn.
Yeah. Well, I
Right?
think good relationships remain curious.
Yes.
Like otherwise your friendships grow stale, your romantic relationship
Yeah.
grows stale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, to another cliche that we hear all of the time, right? It's like, well, we're different now, right? We're different than when we got together.
Yeah.
And, to your end, it's like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing you're different. I tell this to couples all the time, right? It's a
Yeah.
good thing you're not, now for me having kids that are 9 and 6, I'm glad I'm not that. I think I was 19 when I met my wife. Right? I'm glad I'm not that 19-year-old, right? They've changed a lot. But in that change, we need to be able to remain curious, right? So you talked about the friendship system, intimacy, all of it.
Yeah.
It kind of sits on being able to be curious and receive
Yeah.
influence from each other. So
Yeah. No, I agree. Simple is always best because you're gonna remember it because there's so much counseling session. So if it's really complicated, convoluted, can they replicate this in the home? Probably not, and at least not well. So simple, agreed.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
if I can, I talked about how marriage counseling and even success in marriage is both simple and can be difficult.
Yeah.
Right. I think both of those things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I said with communication can be hard, or using those simple tools can be difficult if there's like resentment built up. And one of the things I know you've shared with me is you have an intervention or a method that you use around resentment. Are you okay with sharing that with me? Because
Yeah,
I've been
actually,
wanting to hear about it.
that weaves in well with, I like to use, if I would give you a visual, like a hook that you can hang other things on. So as we work together and progress as a couple, I can reference that hook. So one of them being is early conversation is, understanding creates great communication. Seeking solutions without understanding destroys communication. So we'll bring that out a lot. Typically there's one partner who's not listening. They just want to solve, and we'll bring out that principle. It's a hook. Hey, when we understand well, communication's flowing. But when we just want to solve, I'm overriding my partner. I'm ignoring my partner. I might even actually understand my partner, but they feel just dismissed. Like, you're getting it right, but I don't care.
Yeah.
And so,
Which can be really frustrating for the person who's like trying to solve the problem.
totally.
Right. And
Yeah.
so
I see that a lot where they're like, but I got it right. And yet my partner feels far from me because, well, it's the why. And so that becomes a hook that we can hang different things we talk about, different work we do. With resentment, I like to give the hook of, well, resentment is a protest. So if you think about resentment as this is actually a very self-sabotaging emotion to have. I logically, emotionally, relationally, mentally turn inwards in a self-destructive way, and yet I choose this. Why in the world would we make that bargain of resentment? Well, it's because we're protesting an injustice, a mistreatment, something unfair. And so it's almost like righteous anger, righteous activity. Because I was treated unfairly, I'm choosing resentment. And so one of the ways we've created a method of just identifying that is we begin by going, hey, resentment is a protest. What are you protesting? And usually they don't know, because I've been steeped in resentment for weeks, months, years.
Yeah.
And then we become a really good record keeper in resentment. He forgot to say goodbye as he left. He must be not thinking of me. Left the towels on the floor. He's so inconsiderate. These are probably small, forgivable things, but because of deep held resentments, there's just evidences to the reason I have to stay in this. And so the intervention I give is I go, here's a pen and paper. I want you individually, so don't share this with each other. That's not healthy until this exercise is done. Exhaust your resentments, not to practice them, ruminate, or rehearse. That's not what we're going for, but actually let's recognize what's in there. And then once you've exhausted it, one, that's helpful in itself. Tells the brain, you don't have to carry this anymore. It's been written down. But then come back at, an hour, a day, a week later, and cross off anyone that there's just no hurt, there's no sting. There'll be a handful left, and those are the ones we need to address. And it might be, when 5 years ago this happened, or this was said, or this was not noticed. And then we can actually deal with what's the injustice, what's the protest there. And it might be something like, she never thinks of me first. And that insight is enough to begin a conversation, to begin essentially dislodging that resentment. And we do that by, like a protest. If you imagine protesters standing on the street corner protesting some unjust corporation. Well, if the CEO came down, stood in front of all the protesters with their signs and said, oh, you have such a valid point. I hear you, I see you, and I validate that you feel this way. And if there's possible corrective change, we make that. Well, they put down their signs and they go. And that's what we try and do. But when we don't know what would be healing to that, we get stuck. Or when that partner doesn't know what to do with it, they get stuck. And so it's just an intervention to reveal those things so that we can move them forward. And then really we come to a point where when we let go or begin letting go of resentment, it's so healing and transformative and inviting, because it's like, man, I don't want to hang on to this. This is like, I'm purposely hanging on to toxic waste. Why would I do it?
Right.
That you actually see them going, okay, that was one resentment. I've got a few more. Can we do it again?
Mm.
because I want to be close to my partner. I'm realizing I'm holding something that's keeping them far away. And so we'll just do rinse and repeat of that intervention until they would say, yeah, these are largely dealt with, or they're all dealt with.
Yeah.
So
You know, it's an interesting thing when you share that. I kind of hear those like keywords ringing out, or things that I often hear in the couples therapy room, right? Like something like, oh, I can never do anything right for the other person, right? It feels like everything I do,
yeah,
it just is falling on deaf ears, or whatever it is.
yeah,
I just can't get it right.
yeah,
It sounds like a great intervention for when you're feeling stuck in those areas.
yeah.
The other thing, you know, as a person who's, you know, listening to what you're talking about, like sounds like an amazing way to just identify those things and pare it down to what's really meaningful. The other thing that I hear, and maybe this is like the empathetic side of me,
Mm.
is like, well, sometimes resentment, it just feels so safe,
Mhm.
right? Like even when I identify it,
Yeah,
it feels like I'm giving up a lot to put it down,
yeah,
right? Because what, you know, you gave this CEO and the picket line analogy, which I think is a great metaphor for it,
yeah,
right? But sometimes, you know, the CEO comes down and you're like, I just don't trust that they're
yeah,
going to take right action. I'm going
yeah,
to stay here,
totally.
right? And it's just putting you on the spot a little
No, no,
bit of
no.
like, what do you say to that? Or do you have like a philosophical idea of what to do with that, or an intervention
Yeah.
there?
Well, I mean, that was a quick overview of what, of course, can take many, many sessions, and there's always something that snags you. And I think to your point about, yeah, resentment feeling safe, when we identify, or we're willing to identify, despite choosing this behavior or this way of thinking, it's sabotaging what I want.
Yeah.
Then we're willing to work against it, even if it feels safer, more comfortable, more familiar. But that might happen by degrees. So I often go to the whole, this is John and Julie Gottman as well, the whole bank account of trust analogy,
Mm.
where if I see someone holding back, I might go, looks like the bank account's not that healthy.
Mhm.
And maybe we hit pause, or we most likely don't jump into that resentments activity early on. It's a later on.
Yeah. And you know, as you talk about that, I think it's like
Yeah.
it's such an interesting thing, because what, you know, what we're talking about here, I think we can pin it down to communication, right? But relationship at large,
Yeah,
and then all our individual psychology, how that feeds into it, right?
totally.
And
Yeah.
what you're talking about is like, okay, there's a communication issue, right? So I shared about, here's a really good communication tool. However, sometimes underneath it, there can be those resentments, right? So you work on those resentments, but then with that, there can be challenges of, you know, either trust or commitment, right? Those
Yeah.
are the two big ones that there
Mhm.
tends to be struggle with. So then how do we build that up?
Yeah.
And so it becomes a cyclical thing
Yeah.
where you have to give and take, and almost be able to imagine good outcomes and step out to it,
Yeah.
step into it, right? This is where I say, I think marriage counseling takes so much courage, because you have to give up of yourself a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To be able to trust, hey, you know, I'm going to drop this resentment here, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to allow the other person. But building, you know, then it goes back to the simple things like you were talking about with uh, the emotional bank account, right? We make deposits into that so that the overall atmosphere or culture
Yeah.
of the relationship can facilitate that trust, or it's
Yeah.
deserving of that trust, right?
Well, and resentment says, I'll be free when you change. And so it's really a destructive pattern, because I'm holding and I'm stuck in resentment, yet I give you all the responsibility.
Mm.
So one of the ways a partner can be really supportive as we do this activity, or as we kind of press into those things, is that good listening, that non-judgmental posture, which you're teaching them to do. And that can be hard, you know, especially if you feel like you're being
Mhm.
blamed, or you're in a position where you're hearing your shortcomings or your faults. But if you can help that partner learn, no, this is actually a helpful thing. You're not going to take all the hits. We're unearthing what the real issue is, and you're going to be part of the healing. They experience that and they're like, well, sign me up for more, because then, communication flows. We feel this connection. We feel this great deposit of trust. And that's why I say rinse and repeat, because I love to go, hey, that worked out really well in the counseling office.
Yeah.
Do you think you can do that at home? And sometimes I get this emphatic, like, yeah, we can do that. And great, I'll be like, let's try.
What are
And
some of the common objections to practicing these
I was
things?
gonna say, you often hear it, no way. And it's Aaron, we feel safer when you're in the room. And it's like, well, you just slow us down and you help pull out things. And I go, okay, like, can you envision that happening? How would you do that? We'll do some role play. And then they begin to go, oh, we can do that at home. Or they'll say, I hear this one, we just don't feel ready yet. And that, I respect that. I give a lot of space for that. Like, okay, let's keep going in this direction. Because good counseling is, you're not needing me your whole life.
Yeah.
It's actually the best and worst session when you're like, okay, we've hit our
Yes.
goals. And I grow to really like everyone I work with. And so when we hit those goals, I'm happy, but I'm also like, oh, I really like seeing you every week or 2 weeks. And so it's a hard goodbye or a celebration with some sorrow. But we want to get them to that place, because then we know we did our job. And so I find those objections are sometimes even, they've grown to really appreciate you. And it's kind of like, we just like this cadence of, our relationship feels supported and bolstered. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I hear that, right? And then, but then what you might get into the trap of is, hey, we feel so good coming out of these sessions. And then it feels like there's a decline until we come back,
yeah,
right? And for me, one of the, when I'm first introducing skills, you tend to be fairly deliberate with it, right? Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. Sort of the parameters. You set that.
yeah,
But so one of the objections that you get in practicing this is that, well, it feels awkward or forced, right? I want to be able to just speak naturally with my partner or my spouse,
yeah, yeah.
right? And so to this one is a really interesting thing, and I always find myself thinking, of course, right? Of course it feels forced and unnatural because you're learning a new skill,
Yeah.
right? It's just like anything. I think about my son watching his older sister ride a bike, right? He looks at it, it's like, wow, that looks amazing,
I want to do
right?
that.
She's biking, her hair's flowing in the wind. It looks amazing, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, I want to do that. And then he grabs his bike, he tries a little bit, he falls over, he scrapes a knee, right? It's like, it's uncomfortable, it's awkward.
Yeah.
He sees what the target is, but the practice of it feels so forced and unnatural that it's really difficult to do, right? Forced and natural, and it can even hurt.
Yeah. Do you tell your clients that? Like,
Yeah, sometimes absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I think it's an important reality that we step into. It's like we're trying to learn new skills. And again, I think this is the courage of clients. You talked about like really liking your clients, right? Because you see this, you see the courage, you see them working really hard to do this thing that requires like a certain amount of pain and selflessness. I think it's extraordinary. So.
I think that speaks to the value of having them practice where you can support them. Because I'll use the word clunky a lot. I'm like, this feels clunky. And it's a kind of an inviting word to be like, yeah, we're not there, but we're going through the motions, and just be like, that's fine. Or I'll validate like, clunky, but you did this so well. I saw this, great job. And that's not to patronize. It's actually,
you can do this, you are doing it.
Actually, I like to give them permission, because they're practicing new behaviors. They almost have to infuse new ways of like interjecting this into their relationship, their home.
Right. Yeah.
And I go, if you can't think of that, if nothing comes to mind, just throw me under the bus and just say like, what did Aaron tell us? Or would Aaron approve of this statement? And then throw it out. And then it's kind of a lighthearted moment of like, oh yeah, we're doing this counseling work together. But also I say, if it pokes fun at something we laughed together about or learned in the session, it's a really good moment, almost a big cue. Like, if I'm speaking to you, hey Daniel, I'm trying something new here. It's not going to go well, but I'm trying. Work with me.
Yeah.
And then your partner might go, yeah, that was really awkward, but I see what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I'll play ball. And that's way better than no effort at all.
Yeah.
And I'll often hear them report back like, okay, we threw you under the bus today, or like, tell me about it. And they're like, well, we had this argument and then we went, well, Aaron says, and I'm like, great. If that's what you need to get out of an old pattern and begin a new behavior that's constructive for your connection, your communicating. Amazing. We'll take it. So.
Yeah, I think that's so good on so many levels, Aaron, right? Because so much of the challenge that our clients are experiencing is this pressure, urgency that they feel to get it right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what that causes is them tripping over themselves and doing something that they would otherwise know. Right. A really good example of this, I think, is a really common issue that I see right now is an emotional intimacy discrepancy, right? So one partner, and oftentimes it's a female partner, is wanting more emotional intimacy and expression from the male partner, right? The problem is that the male partner grew up in a world where he was socialized away from emotion, right? 'Cause whether it's from parents or the schoolyard with other boys, right? Emotion typically is punished, right? Especially for people, I'll say our age and older.
I appreciate that.
I'm a little bit more gray, but but for people our age and older, like that emotional language just wasn't there for men in the same way. So then they're confronted with a demand that I think is valid and necessary, right? To show up in this way. But then you kind of become this person who's like in class and they're getting called on by the teacher for an answer that they have no clue about, right? Because they've been putting their head down doodling. Right. And then they're like, oh, I don't know. And then so often it comes out in, anger and things like that. But what you're talking about just offers that kind of peaceable solution to be like, hey, you know what? All pressure's off. We're just trying to work on this thing together. Right. Creates that we orientation. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's a great, like I see that so often too. And I love how you said it's a valid request. It's to say, I need this from my partner. I want this.
Well, yeah, I think it's both valid and necessary.
Yeah.
Right.
I like to, that's one of those moments where I'll pick on each partner equally. I might say to her, has he ever really done this well? And she'd be like, when we were dating or, early on, but, and then, historically for the last 10 years, no. Okay. And then equip her to go, when you see him trying, what are you actually seeing? Like the language might not be there or the comfort might not be there yet, but she can read into that because she knows him like, oh, you know what? When he says this, that means he's really hurting. And he needs compassion. I'll be like, then go explore it, pull it out of him, help him out that way. He'll feel connected because, she's helping bring this out. And then for him, that courage to be like, try something new or go that extra. I actually use the language of, we want you to be vulnerable to the point where you're comfortable and then one more step. And that's how we increase connection, not vulnerable beyond what's safe and acceptable. But like, if this is my threshold, like what's one more step look like? And that might be just going, okay, I'm gonna try something new. And that's enough to begin momentum.
Can I ask you just a curious question? In the current atmosphere, I can just like conjure up an objection to what you had just said. Or just around like, well, I shouldn't have to be responsible for his emotional maturity, right? Like why is it my responsibility to help him? Right? Versus him helping himself. What would you, how'd you respond to that?
Can I give you two answers?
I would love to.
The direct answer is, well, you get what you put into a relationship. So if I'm not willing to help my partner, I'm probably not going to get much in return. So we have to be a friend to have a friend. Now, I still hear that pushback of like, I've been trying forever. Fair. I like the phrase, self-sabotaging, because sometimes we use a behavior that works for us in the moment, but the long-term result is painful or disagreeable. And so if it's one of he just has to, or my partner just has to figure that works for me right now, but in the long run, I'm still stuck with a relationship I don't, I'm not happy with, or I'm not feeling connected. And so can we, because all you and I are teasing out is, here's a different way of looking at this, behaving in this, expressing this, that might get you the end result you want. Try it on for size. And if you don't like it, that's okay. That's what we're here to attempt. And so it's a challenge, yes, but one that is aligned, I hope, with their values, their convictions, their beliefs. Like, I want a better relationship. So I like that pushback, because every now and then I wonder how you handle this. You get a couple and it's like one of the partners believes they have no work to do. They just brought their partner to be worked on. And I don't know if that's ever true. There's always something that you can contribute.
Yes.
How would you handle that or challenge that?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think that happens actually maybe more often than people might think.
Yeah.
On one hand, it's like a cliche, right? And I've had couples come in and like, yeah, we're here to work on it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, kind of tongue in cheek, right? But one of the things that I think is really important as we're going through some of the interventions that we do, personal will say often, well, tried everything, I've done this, I've done that, I've done this.
Yeah.
Right? What I've learned, and this actually came from a experience working with the court system. So when I worked with the men who were convicted of violent crimes in the city, they were arrested on parole. Some of the conditions was doing counseling, essentially to take responsibility for their own actions, right? You could call it anger management, and the mechanism in which you do that is to begin taking responsibility, right, for how you interact and grow in empathy. Right. But so often I would hear this, right? Well, no, this isn't my problem. Right. And this is from it sounds almost comical. It's like, you're convicted of a violent crime and you're saying that it's not your problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not comical. Right.
Yeah.
It's a very serious way in which people, all of us, can look at the world, right, with certain biases. So one thing that I think is one intervention that I use, it's a simple question, and it almost sounds, again, tongue in cheek, but it's not.
Yeah.
Right? So when a person says, I've done this, I've done this, and they're still presented with a hurting relationship, often say, how's that working out for you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And again, it's directly to the point, I think, which is what makes it effective.
Yeah.
It also forces people to confront the fact that even though they're trying, it's not working. And there might be ways to shift how you're trying, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm never questioning the effort or the heart that people have in relationships. I shouldn't say never, but rarely, I think. They're in that room for a reason, right? So I think it's really useful to kind of point directly in that way.
Yeah. No, that's good. I really appreciate the sensitivity to go see the effort.
Yeah.
And that counts. We just didn't end up where we want to be. And so new options, new ways of looking at things. So no, I really appreciate that. I'm stealing that one. I'm going to do that. It's not a question I say out loud, but I will hold in my thoughts. Just curiosity is, I wonder how they got here. And it might not be in the counseling room, but I mean to this conclusion or this attitude. And when you can kind of tease that out and go, oh, I see. It helps you actually begin nudging that person out of maybe might be resentment, might be just a really stuck attitude or perspective that's actually working against them. And sometimes it takes a good while to really build that rapport and get to know the couple. Sometimes we hide that stuff. I've worked with couples who, months later, they disclose the most important thing, and that, oh, well, everything changes. And I respect that in the sense of, we might not feel comfortable, but, I do like to go, anything that's useful, just helps me help you. And so that at times becomes the game changer to like, oh, now we can unlock the key stuff. Or I don't, well, you probably find this too. The main issue that they share at the beginning is more like a test. Like
Right.
if Daniel can help us with this, then we'll throw the hard one at
Then,
him later
yeah.
on. And then you hear that come out or bleeds out.
Of course.
Yeah.
And this is actually one of the things that I'll share with clients and really try to normalize.
Mm.
One of my first supervisor called them door handle conversations.
Yeah.
So it's like when you're kind of getting up and you're saying goodbye, you're closing up the conversation. The client will look at the clock, be like, "Oh, and there's this,"
Yeah.
right? And they'll drop that
Yeah.
big topic on you.
Yeah.
And they'll come in feeling, they'll come back in after that feeling a little sheepish, right? Like,
Yeah.
yes, I know I dropped that on you, right?
Yeah.
But you can really normalize it, right? Being like, I think that's you intuitively, instinctively listening to yourself, what you're able to tolerate
Yeah.
in that session,
Yeah.
right? How you need to titrate
Yeah.
that conversation.
Yeah.
Maybe you weren't ready for it
Yeah.
in that, initial third or
Yeah.
whenever it happens, whatever session it
That's
happens
the
in.
pacing you can handle. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's okay, right? And it's actually normal enough that counselors for a long time have had names for it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't throw you after a while.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. No, I like that.